Well, welcome to our program tonight. Thanks for braving the beginning of spring and a lot of rain. I'm Ozzie Nelson. I'm class of '87. I'm balancing microphones here. I'm also a member of the advisory board of the College of Arts and Science. Tommy, in many ways, met my wife in freshman orientation here and was married in the chapel, so it's good to be back. And tonight is a special night. It's the introduction of our SOLVE program. The College of Arts and Science at St. Thomas has created a systematic way for students to use and develop their critical and creative thinking skills to solve real-world problems as part of their college education. The SOLVE projects are multidisciplinary and externally facing. SOLVE brings research and application into the community to make learning and experiences truly engaging. We at this institution believe that we have the opportunity to have the resources, responsibility, and support to encourage the engagement of its entire community to be a harmonious influence in the fabric and pillars of our broader community and world. As a student and an ACC president, I participated with a number of other passionate students to give a voice and a fresh perspective to a number of campus, community, and world issues. What I believed over 30 years ago on this subject has not changed, and that is that the youth are in a unique position to support perspectives untarnished by historic obstacles, new generational values and lenses applied to old biases, and a passion to positively shape the world which they will inherit. For that reason, my heart is so warmed to see that the university has had the vision to provide the structure and encouragement in the form of the SOLVE program. Tonight, we present our first SOLVE Initiative community event focused on civility and public discourse. Our hope is that in the future, that it will further a culture in which difficult conversations can be had with respect and constructive collaborative contributions from all perspectives. Now I'd like to introduce Dr. Angela Halverson, the chair of the Political Science Department and associated faculty in the Women's Studies in College of Arts and Science here at St. Thomas. Dr. Halverson joined the university in 1999. She teaches courses in American politics, women and politics, in public policy, and received the UST Distinguished Education Award in both 2012 and 2005. Her research interests include citizens' participation in community energy efficiency initiatives and women's politics, with publications in energy policy, sustainability, carbon management, the Bulletin of Science and Technology and Society, and women's politics. It is my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Halverson.
Thank you all so much, and hello everyone. Welcome again to the SOLVE Initiative at the College of Arts and Sciences at St. Thomas. I am really just honored to be sharing the stage with these three remarkable leaders. I've been looking forward to this event for a long time, so I'm really glad that you all are here to share it with us. I've been following this story for a few months now, and so I know that you all are in for a very thoughtful and engaging and interesting discussion, so enjoy. I'd like to begin by introducing our three panelists, and then I promise eventually I will sit down, but I'm a teacher, so I like to move around. I will do my best to sit at a certain point. Right now I have to stand. I would like to introduce our three panelists first. This is Mayor Jenny Halverson on the end. Mayor Halverson was the first woman elected mayor of West St. Paul after serving on the city council since 2013. And she was elected mayor in 2016 and served through 2018. So we're delighted to have her with us today. Yeah, please. Councilmember Wendy Berry. Councilmember Berry was elected in November of 2018 to represent Ward 3 of West St. Paul. And I think it's worth noting that in her first election, she received 59% of the vote after having lived in that community for 3 years, which we would say in the discipline of political science is remarkable. So nicely done. So please, again, thanks. And our third panelist is Ms. Katie Doman. Yeah. Katie co-founded Women of West St. Paul after the April 2018 City Council meeting to create a space where women of all ages could meet together and create change in their community. And that organization is still going strong. I know there's members of that organization here with us tonight, and you'll learn more about that organization tonight too. So thanks to all of you for being here. Our focus tonight is on the intersections of gender and politics as played out in our neighboring city of West St. Paul over the past few years. And I know we need to provide a bit of background for those of you who are unfamiliar with what's been going on with city politics in West St. Paul. So we're going to do that and sort of set the stage with 2 brief clips. So we're going to have one clip that we're going to start with, which is a news story from Fox 9 from last May. So we'll start with that one. Thank you, Associate Dean Waldner.
It's
a little bit of
March
capitalism first.
Get a sweet 16% below MSRP on most of these Buick models.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. And these days, it seems there's just no such thing as politics as usual. And just when you thought you'd heard it all, another strange story comes to light.
This time, allegations of harassment and sexism in West St. Paul, where that city's mayor says she has become a target. Fox 9's Leah Bino joining us with details on this. So, Leah, where is all of this going?
Well, yesterday there was a special city council meeting called to further discuss the situation that sparked all of this, but council didn't have a quorum. Also, the applicant at the center of it all withdrew her application, and meanwhile, the community discussion is just getting started.
There was a small political brush fire that basically turned into the city burning down.
That so-called brush fire erupted at the April 23rd West St. Paul City Council meeting.
This will not be forgotten, folks.
Good old boys.
I'm sorry, that is an inappropriate comment, Madam Mayor.
No, it is not.
Well, yours was inappropriate.
Moments prior, the council approved 2 planning commission appointments by Mayor Jenny Halverson, but denied her third choice. All happened to be women.
I appreciate the mayor's desire to have more women involved in city government. I don't think that should be the determining factor.
When there was someone else in this chair, we were lobbying for his ability and privilege to appoint, and that should be his prerogative. But now that it's me here, that's not the position.
I want to make it very clear, I'm qualified for this position.
Samantha Green believes the vote was personal based on her criticism of the council in the past. The next day, Green found a box of tissues placed outside her home, and the mayor found a box of feminine pads. Both also reported to police someone banging on their doors at various times of day and night.
That close to us, that close to my kids, my family, that was really disturbing, besides the message that they were trying to send.
Councilmember Anthony Fernandez is also disturbed by the harassing items found outside Green and Mayor Halverson's homes, but does not agree the 4 no votes, including his, were sexist. He says it was an attempt to help pave the way for a planning commissioner who wanted to be reinstated.
I made a bad decision. I made the wrong decision.
Now Green has organized a collection for feminine products to be donated, but both Green and Mayor Halverson say they look forward to further discussion and something good coming out of an ugly situation.
I've been the only one there for almost 6 years, and to finally feel this community stand up and get engaged is just, it's amazing. It's wonderful.
Now, a large community gathering is expected for that next city council meeting, which is set for May 14th. That will also serve as a drop-off location for those donated pads and tampons. Plus, a donation site has been set up that has already raised more than $1,700.
Okay, so although all of this may appear to begin at the city council meeting in April, this next clip demonstrates that the story actually begins earlier than that, so just wait. The second clip is of Mayor Halverson's opening remarks before the May City Council meeting, where she describes some of her experiences in office, both I think during the time of City Council and as mayor, and she also lays out guidelines for how citizens and council members are to conduct themselves at that meeting. And since this is a civil discourse event, I really want you to actually hear her words because I think they're a powerful part of this story. Just to give you a little context, because you can't tell from the angle of the camera, there were about 150 people in attendance at that meeting who were prepared, many of them, to share comments during citizen comment period, and they do for many of you do, or I recognize you from having watched those meetings many times, for more than an hour and a half, hour and 40 minutes. Yeah. It's really unheard of. So if you look closely at the end of the clip, you'll see our two panelists line up for their turn at the podium. You can see that too. So I will just let the clip sort of speak for itself, and then we'll move into some questioning. So I'll help get this one set up.
Life representatives. Tonight we're going to move on to our citizen comments, and we're going to handle this a little bit differently this evening, but first I'll read you the required verbiage on the agenda. Individuals may address the City Council about any item not included on the regular agenda. Speakers are requested to come to the podium, state their name and address for the clerk's record. Generally, the City Council will not take official action on items discussed at this time, but may typically refer the matter to staff for a future report or direct that the matter be scheduled on an upcoming agenda. So tonight, before folks come up, I know we have a crowd here tonight, and I would like to kind of introduce why I think a lot of us are here. So I'm going to give just hopefully kind of a short statement, and then we're going to turn it over for citizen comments. And I'll talk about some ground rules at the end here, but we'll handle all the citizen comments, and then we'll come back for council comments, just so this doesn't turn into a debate at the podium. But I'll start with my statement this evening. In light of the incredibly strong public response to 4 of our council members' refusal to approve my appointment of Samantha Green to our Planning Commission, I'm going to take a few minutes to share some of my thoughts on the issues of what has happened and what needs to change to ensure a more diverse group of community leaders is allowed to serve our city. I've been cautioned by some that my openly speaking to this tonight is improper and puts the city in a bad light. I disagree. Every city, every community, every group of people anywhere on earth has issues that are difficult. It is how the community reacts in the face of these challenges that defines whether or not they shrivel or they thrive as a result. It is critical that we take the time to earnestly address this issue now. Almost 6 years ago, I was elected as only the 5th woman to serve on our city council. Almost 2 years ago, I was elected as the very first woman to ever serve as mayor. During my tenure of nearly 6 years, I've been advocating for the broader change that needs to happen with our city council to truly allow for more diverse input from our community. Having heard the responses issued by the 4 council members in the interim period between our last regular meeting on April 23rd and now, I want to be clear that your votes were not an innocent mistake. They were purposeful, and that this is not a matter to be taken lightly. Regarding that response, those public comments since our last meeting have referred to this as a quote-unquote political brush fire. This is not political. This is about sexism, harassment, decency, and respect. This is not a brush fire. The public outcry over this has been unlike anything I have experienced. It is about much more than the harassment that occurred following our April 23rd meeting. It is about the culture that has been created here that culminated in the vote on April 23rd. This was not an isolated incident. For the past 6 years, there have been attempts to intimidate me. I have been threatened, subtly and not so subtly, in various ways. I've been followed many times. I've been followed home from meetings. People have regularly driven past my home. I've been followed around and outside of the city, tracking what I am doing and who I am with. It has at least twice reached the point where I have cautioned in open council work sessions that if it did not stop, I would be taking this matter to the public. In ways that are all too familiar to many women, it has been plainly seen when credit for projects and ideas is transferred to my male counterparts. It has been seen when during meetings with outside consultants, no one makes eye contact with me, the only woman at the table. It is seen during meetings when I have not been recognized, when I have been talked over, and when there have been many attempts at putting words in my mouth. Offensive comments in this type of treatment are nothing new. It also includes jovial comments about being attracted to me while taking a seat at the table. It includes comments on my appearance, and it has included being told that a colleague was looking down my shirt throughout a meeting. Actions like these I have described clearly create an environment where the voices of those from underrepresented communities are stymied, and this needs to stop now. This is just a small sampling of what I, other women, and those in underrepresented communities face every single day. This is not just about each incident and its fallout. This is about the menacing culture it creates and the feelings it breeds. It is the attempted picking away at our will and our confidence as each time we pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off, and head back to the table. It is about the ugliness that permeates the entire environment, and we carry it with us in meetings, in negotiations, in our lives, and in our homes. But we keep going, and we keep fighting, because we want to get back to work, because we are qualified, and because we are really good at doing the work. Being here tonight, using this platform and this microphone to speak to this, feeling this wave of support that has roared through our city, it is inspiring and it is empowering. This movement that has surged in our city to turn something so dishearteningly negative into something so overwhelmingly positive speaks to the remarkable strength and integrity of our community. I could go on and on about the importance of this issue, about history and the current cultural relevance of the confrontation of sexism and harassment being discussed here tonight. But instead, I want to hear from you. We need to hear from you. Please share your thoughts, your reactions, your questions. This is your City Hall. Your First Amendment rights are important to me, and they will be recognized and upheld here. I'll lay down a few ground rules so that we can maintain some basic decorum. Please refrain from using any vulgarities in your comments. Please remain at the podium. Given the number of people in attendance, please limit your comments to 2 minutes or less. Know that attempts or allusions to threaten the physical safety of anyone in the room will not be tolerated. In an effort to manage time and also to uphold decorum further, I'll ask the council please refrain from answering questions until everyone has had an opportunity to speak. If after council is done speaking there are remaining questions and comments, I may allow limited time for that as well. Again, just so we're clear, you're free to ask questions of us, but know that we will not immediately respond. We, mayor and council, will have that opportunity to speak after we've had the opportunity to listen to you. I've always believed that the most important part of our job here is to listen. These ground rules will help us ensure that all of you are heard and that your energy here tonight continues to shine a light and continues to be a movement toward positive change. Thank you.
Okay, so now that we all have a better sense of what we're talking about, I'd like to get started here with our discussion, and I have a specific question for each of you all individually, and then every other question will be open to any and all of you. So Mayor Halverson, I'd like to start with you. At the April 23rd City Council meeting, before discussion of your appointments of 3 women to the Planning Commission, you announced that you would not be running for another term. And at that time, you called on the women of West St. Paul to, quote, step up this year, end quote, saying that it was really important to have women involved in West St. Paul's city leadership. And since you were the only woman at the table, quite literally for 6 years, I think you're in a really unique position to answer this question, which is, why does it matter if women hold local office and are involved in local government?
Well, I think this is a really, does this work? Can you hear me?
Yeah, maybe it just has to be a little closer. I'm sorry.
Can everybody hear me? Okay. So thanks, Freddie. So I think this is a really big question, right? And it has a global answer, and then I can probably kind of bring it down to a local level with some examples. I think in 2 words, right, representation matters. I mean, it's really that simple, and it's really not something that I think we need to explain or debate anymore. It matters. I think that it's important. We're part of a representative democracy, right? And so our government should represent what we look like in our communities. And I think that at a local level, I can give some examples of when that really made a change or had an effect. And I think we forget how, we all pay attention to the national stage, right? In presidential runs, and we'd love to see our first woman as president and all that, and that's all important too. But the stuff we're doing on a local level affects our families directly. It affects our neighbors directly, our friends, our schools that our kids go to. So all those things are important for a variety of reasons. I know there were things even like park planning. Everybody from West St. Paul and surrounding communities is familiar with Harmon Park, right? And that we brought that to the table when I came onto the council, and we were talking about revamping that whole area. When those plans first came out, the splash pad was about this big on a plan, about this big. And I remember talking my neighbor, another young mom, into joining our Park and Rec Commission. And I said, Brandy, this thing needs to be a lot bigger. She said, you're right. These are hugely popular. They're accessible. They're free. We need more of these in our communities. So we fought and we fought and we fought, and that splash pad ended up being, about this big. And it has been wildly successful for all those reasons. Had I not been there, or someone similarly situated, had she not been there, we would have still had this, right? And again, that's a direct impact. I mean, the other thing is really even a life and death safety related. We had a bike ped plan that was done for us, right? And that sat on the shelf for I don't know how long. And when I came on, I started asking questions about it because I use our streets as a pedestrian. I use our streets on my bike with my kids on their bikes. And I see all the people who are similarly situated, who are using alternate forms of transportation, right? Not just sitting in their cars. And so we got that adopted and we started moving that forward. And we still have a ways to go, but we're picking away at it and we're moving in the right direction. So those kind of things don't happen unless you have someone who can see. And even those who are seated and have the best of intentions, who are part of an overrepresented community, they can't help because they can't identify those needs, even if they want to. So I think that it's important. Like I said, on a larger scale, representation matters, but locally it really affects our families and our friends and our neighbors.
Thanks for those really specific examples, because I think that helps really make the point. Yeah, thank you. Okay, Councilman Berry. At the May 14th meeting, when you announced your candidacy for City Council, that was the meeting you just saw. That's a very exciting moment. You asked council members to look out at the citizens in the standing room only crowd, and you noted that, quote, it's not quite like looking in a mirror, which is a pretty powerful connection between the question I just asked. You also encouraged those gathered in the audience to run for City Council and apply for committees and commissions, specifically, quote, more women, more people of color, more people who don't feel like they've been fairly represented, end quote. Can you elaborate a little bit on those points and their significance to what's been going on in your community?
Yeah, super loud.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm loud, I realized.
Just kind of piggybacking on what Jenny said, it is important to be able to see people that you feel comfortable seeing in a place that's leading you or representing you. The female part is huge. I mean, if you look at the demographics of a city, it's not 1 out of every 6 people is a woman. I mean, probably 50-50. So that's important. Parents are important. People that have families are important. Working people are important. And in reference to having the people that were at that table look out into the audience that were there, one, there were probably more people than have ever been in that city hall. So I just wanted to make sure they were aware of that. And also there weren't many retired attorneys or retired business owners, and there's nothing wrong with that, except when that's all we have. And it was important to me as a person, as part of the LGBTQ community, to be representative of that. But also for my kids who have two moms, to be able to look at a city council and be like, oh, my moms can do that too. And just representing people as a whole, and not just being a self-serving piece, was important to me too, in representing the people of West St. Paul, because I don't know if that was always been the case, particularly the last 2 to 4 years.
Thank you. Ms. Dillman. Again, at that May 14th meeting, you closed your citizen comments with this quote: "See, you thought that these tactics," and that's what she's describing as elsewhere, disrespect, sexist, and boorish behavior, "you thought these tactics would make women and people who offer differing perspectives run away from politics, but we're running in," end quote. And I'm wondering if you can describe a little bit how you ran in and why you chose to do so.
When I think back to like the first time we all met, it was very, we didn't know what to expect. There were probably 3 or 4 of us who had gotten wind of what was going on up at City Hall, and we were kind of like, maybe we should do something about, like, we were really mad about what had been going on, and felt bad that we were so unaware. And so we thought, okay, well, we'll just like have an informal coffee, and people who want to come can come, and we'll just see what happens. So I went out and I bought a giant Post-it notepad, and we made a little tiny agenda, and we just thought, well, we'll see who shows up. And we booked the back room of our local coffee shop, thinking, I guess in my mind I thought, gosh, if 8 people show up, that would be a huge win. And I think we had 38 or 40 people show up that first night, and it was like 110 degrees outside. So we were all just pouring sweat, but everybody was so fired up about what was going on. And I think it surprised the few of us that had pulled the meeting together, which we had done very quietly, only because we didn't know what we were going to do next, and we didn't necessarily want to show our hand about it either. And so we realized that there was really a desire in our community to do something, not just to come and talk about it. Our first agenda item was the airing of grievances, so we figured everybody was going to want to come and complain. And we could get that out on the table, and then maybe we could get some business done. And what was amazing was that people came to air their grievances, but they often would start out by saying, can you believe XYZ, councilperson, whoever said this? You know what we should do is. And I think the few of us that pulled that meeting together just thought like, oh, there's a real opportunity here and a real desire to do something. And I think just talking about, the relationship between your local government and the federal government, we were in a very particularly tough, tense time period where we were feeling a lot of inability and powerlessness to affect change on the national level. And I think suddenly we had a room full of 40 women who were already mad and then you can draw direct relationships to the things that were happening on the city level with what was happening nationally. Like the headlines in the news, you could have just like covered up names and it would have felt like it fit the city. And so it was like, finally, this is something where like we can show up and we can have our voices be heard. And we had an ally with Mayor Halverson. And that's again why representation matters, because we reached out to her and said we'd like to come and we'd like to do something about this. And so maybe that wouldn't have been quite as successful without that hand up.
Yeah. Oh, you all do such a nice job feeding each other. This is going to be so fun. Okay. I love having all 3 of you together on this panel because I think you present such compelling examples of what leadership looks like. And so I have a kind of leadership-focused question for you all. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit, and you already have somewhat, a little bit about carving out space for new leadership and kind of creating space for new leaders to emerge. And obviously that happens when other people run for office, but how it also happens at the community level where people can sort of figure out their own ways to carve their own involvement in the way that they feel comfortable. And I'm wondering if you had experience with that in any of your Women of West St. Paul or any other community level activity.
You want me to start?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I would say one of the things that we didn't plan on that came to be a real happy surprise with our group is that we really planned on being sort of an affinity group, an advocacy group that could go in and be a voice, especially for people who felt voiceless. And in fact, in some of our early meetings, we had members of our community come who were too frightened to come to City Hall, too frightened to interact with police. But we were able to incorporate their viewpoints, and that's going to be kind of a continuing thing that we're going to be working on this year. But I think what ended up happening is that we became an incubator for people who wanted to run for office, and that truly was not the intention at first. And so we discovered that not only did the women in our group really have a really good time going up to City Hall and letting people know exactly how they felt, but that they suddenly, that feeling of empowerment made them feel like they wanted to run for office. And so, you know, we had that within our group. We had people within our group that wanted to get on committees and commissions that had been sitting with vacancies for a long time. And we were able to fill those spaces with people who could provide a different perspective than what was previously existed. So that would be one way I would see. And I would just say that with the WOW group in particular, we saw so many women who came in and said, I'm never going to speak in the city council chambers. I'm never going to call people or phone bank or door knock. That's like way too freaky for me. But I will show up and I will do things for you guys. And what ended up happening is that like the very last, Mayor Halverson's very last meeting, our last holdout who said, I will never get up and speak, got up and spoke. And I cried like in the back of the room because I just felt like that is part of how we are molding leaders in our community. Whether they end up running for office is almost immaterial because they're being leaders on their own block, in their own neighborhood. They're being role models for people who are watching, because our city council meetings are now very highly watched TV. And you know, that's creating that representation in that space for people to feel like if they come to us, we want to empower them. And that they should just feel empowered to speak up in our community because we did it and it worked.
You know, I think part of it too, and I don't know, maybe I'm going away from your question, I don't know, but I think part of what helps create that space where other people feel empowered to run, right, was I felt like, especially you saw at that May 14th meeting, I think, you know, having a woman in office is helpful. Just because of the representation, but also because, especially at that meeting, we finally were making the rules, right? And we were setting the framework. And I remember sitting with John Justin in the audience and his wife, Callie Freeman, before that meeting, and talking about the frustrations and how so much stuff was happening in our community, but people were afraid to talk, and they didn't know how to get it out there. And so I knew that if I could set a stage that was fair, and that if the women who were telling me that they were too scared, if I could give them, just look at me, it will be okay. And if you're not comfortable, then don't do it. But I'll be there, and I'll be looking. And it will be okay. Because we're not going to do this. Like the ground rules I said, we're not going to do the back and forth. You're going to have the space and the time to say what you need to say. And that is something that had never happened before, right? Or at least that I had never been a part of that. So I think that is a way to, because that, like Katie was saying, that gave women and others in underrepresented communities the feeling that they could speak. And then that led to, well, I can speak. Now I want to be on a committee. Now I want to run for office. Now, not only when you had the initial question about why does local politics matter, how do we get to state, national level? Well, it starts here. It starts on school boards, at city councils, and all those things. So I think that's, from my perspective, one way that we do that.
Yeah, I mean, yes to all of that. You know, Katie mentioned people saying they weren't They weren't going to speak at the podium. They weren't going to, door knock. And when people want something, they change their mind pretty quick. And it's great to see. And door knocking is not for everyone, right? I mean, the people that would show up to volunteer to door knock for me, I was like, it involves people, right? and they were good with it. But other people did other things, like we wrote postcards. And so there was a gigantic room full of 90% of introverts writing postcards. And that's because they wanted to lead in a way, and that was an opportunity that they were comfortable with. And I think sometimes we look at just running for office as a way of leadership, when that's not even part of it. I mean, I wouldn't have been elected if I didn't have all these other people stepping up in different leadership positions. So it doesn't always have to come with a title, to your point.
I think that's an excellent point, and I think everybody in WOW at some point has been asked, so when are you running for office? And it's a wonderful compliment, but it's also, but we can affect a lot right here. Look at what we did. None of us are elected officials, and now we have the ear of people, on the council, within the committees, the planning commission, and we've consistently shown up, and so they know we're going to be there. We're either going to be watching, or we're going to be asking questions, or we're going to have opinions. And so it has created that, foot in the door. And from there, I wondered if at the end of Mayor Halverson's term, if there would be a little bit of a dropping off, just because what happened was dramatic, and it was really emotional for a lot of us. But that once you get a taste of that, once you get that chance to affect some change about something that you really care about, and everybody in WOW cares about different things. We don't all necessarily have the same goals. We have the same mission, but not necessarily the same sub-goals in mind. Every time someone just does something, I'm just so amazed, and my heart grows 6 sizes, because it's something that they just really, really cared about, and so they just went out and did it and made it happen. And some of those people are sitting in the audience tonight. And that's also been the key to the success, like you said, is leaders at every level, whether they're volunteering for this grassroots scrappy community that sort of popped up, or they're running for office, or they're trying to get on a committee, or do something else.
I really love the example of the ground rules for the meeting for a number of reasons. One, I really like your point, Mayor Halverson, about when you're in the room and at the table, you can create the rules in a way that is going to be a civil discourse and be an effective discourse, right? I think that's the key, is that civil discourse can be a very effective way of making your point, particularly when, in your case, you all were challenging the status quo, which by definition can be seen as disruptive, right? And can be by definition seen as uncivil when you're just there making a very calm point, right? So you have a very delicate balancing act. So I'm always impressed when I watch everyone at that podium, because the level of preparation was clear, and the level of coordination in terms of arguments, and not everybody saying the same thing, and things that are difficult to do if you don't put in the time to plan. So it's a very impressive example.
I think we rushed 2 meetings of WOW in between those 2 meetings, and kind of figured out who wanted to say what, kind of based on the airing of grievances. I hope I have some Seinfeld fans in here. I feel like it's been a very straight face when I say that. But and we did really specifically talk about that the most effective thing we could do with our 2 minutes was to make sure that we were hitting it from all sides. And so, we workshopped some of our comments. Some of us showed up and just let it rip, and that was okay too. But we had a lot of, we were trying to pull the reins back, because everybody had a very visceral reaction to what was going on. And it was never fun to be like, I'm going to tone that down just a little. Because,
smile more.
Yeah, can you smile?
Can you talk softer?
But just in terms of having a civil discourse, we kind of kept saying, we have to be twice as calm. We have to be, make our points. We have to stay on message. We have to stay on script, or it's all going to blow up in our faces. Don't give them an inch, so.
Well, and to that point, I think about the civil discourse is that the intention never was you know, and my comments that night had several drafts and redrafts, as John can tell you. The initial one was very different. But the purpose of that night was not to shame, and it wasn't to embarrass, but the purpose for all of us was to create change. And we knew that we needed to share a certain amount of this to get people's attention, so that people knew that the problem was real and that it was constant, and it, you know, how deep it ran. And so, like Katie was saying, you know, the airing of grievances and all those things, and those are great, and those are important too. But taking it into that forum and being able to have a civil discourse about it is, in my mind, the only reason that it has had long-term success, right? And that was the goal.
Well, thanks for that, all of you. Okay, this is the question that we talked about, that I said I have to give a little bit of a prelude and link it to some women in politics research, just so it makes sense as a question. So we know in women in politics that women tend to have lower group consciousness than other politically underrepresented groups. So what this means is that it's generally more difficult to create solidarity around gender identity than it is to create political solidarity around, say, racial and ethnic identity, for example. So there's a lot of reasons for this that I won't get into all of them. I'll just mention a few. You know, many women of all racial and ethnic identities have men in their lives, share their lives with men in some way, so that's a cross-cutting cleavage is what we call it in political science. Also, many women share their lives with men economically, so they feel less of a group consciousness to women in general and more of a sort of partnered consciousness with men. And of course, for some women, we shouldn't overlook, there's a social cost to some sort of gender-driven or feminist consciousness that not everyone is willing to sort of pay that penalty. So although many types of community members rallied in support of Mayor Halverson, as the formation of Women of West St. Paul and everyone lined up at the citizen comments at multiple city council meetings demonstrate, there were a lot of women as women standing in solidarity with the mayor in a way that I have to tell you is remarkable. I think maybe it seems normal to all of you because you've lived through it, but from my perspective, 20 years of studying women in politics, it's highly unusual. And I'd love for each of your thoughts as to what it is about this situation that mobilized women to use their political power so effectively. It's the question of the night, but no pressure.
Well, a lot of it goes back to what I think Katie already alluded to, that there was all this stuff happening at the national level, right? And so it felt like something that, oh my gosh, it's right here. Oh my gosh, I know who he is. I know who he is. I know who she is. She lives down the block. You know, and so it was something that you could do something about, right? And it was right here. But as far as, you know, and that's in my comments. I had said, you know, I have never felt something like this before, like you're referring to.
Yes.
And I'm not quite sure what that was. I don't know. And part of it to me is that we just have a really special community. I mean, it really is. But it is remarkable, and I have never, ever felt that before. Something that you always wish for, right? And that you always hope exists somewhere. But I don't know if I can answer it. I don't know if you guys have clearer thoughts on that. But
we have a group of women that are so phenomenal. I don't know, maybe there's something in the water in West St. Paul. I'm so proud of every single one of the women in our group because they all were there in service of something, right? No one was really there because they initially were trying to get elected or because they had an axe to grind, specifically over some other esoteric issue with a council member or something. And so the ego always got put somewhere else. When we were talking about, you know, what do we need to do? How do we need to carry out these plans at all these meetings? There were lots of ideas. And we had to really call down to what we thought would be the most powerful, most unifying message. And I know Judy Rangel's in the room, and were you thinking of that
Where's
example?
Judy?
And somebody told Judy no about something. I don't even know what the idea was, frankly. And then they were worried that Judy would feel bad that we said no, which is such a, I feel like a classically female issue that we've been conditioned for. And when we sort of asked Judy, like, are you going to be upset with us because we said no? She said, I like to hear a woman say no. And so, and that hits on something else, which is a strength of the group, that we have an intergenerational group of women. So we have first wavers in our group. We have third wave feminists in our group. We had women who got up at the meeting that aren't in our group that we were like, how can we recruit that lady? Like, this woman got up and she was like, I marched in Washington, and I live, she didn't even live in West St. Paul, and she's like, I've had enough. And we're like, how do we get that lady? And that has been a real strength for us. And I think, trying to think about how we can expand that reach to, right? And make sure that we're getting all the aspects of our community. I think everybody in our group is really focused on how we can do that. It's not about me, I don't want to pay more taxes, whatever. It's about, like, has anyone ever gone to this neighborhood and done a get out the vote? Has anyone ever translated these materials into Spanish for our Spanish-speaking residents? What can we do to foster some better relationships so that people of color feel comfortable coming to these meetings? Those are things that we're really serious about, and it's not just about, like, yeah, we told them, And I think when we got that initial movement of, like, oh, they're taking us seriously, like, this is a thing that's really happening, then we felt like, okay, now we can do even more of that. So it was like we got rewarded, like, all this, great brain chemistry for doing it the right way for once. So, like, we want to do that again.
Yeah, it's really cool to reliving this, like, watching it and hearing your quotes that made you sound really smart. And,
the story holds up.
Right.
Yeah.
Fooled you guys.
And just stop here. Stop.
Okay. Yeah. I think for me, and you're probably gonna be mad about this, but like, I'd met Jenny and John, actually, John Justin, a couple months before all this started becoming public, and so I was already pretty excited about running for office and the potential of it, and just it was a bike ped plan. I'm telling a story, and I was like, I'm so mad that nothing's happening with it. I just wanted to flip a table. Never flipped a table, but I want to. And that's one thing that led me to is, why can't we move on this? And so as these things progressed and all this came out, and it was like, wait, I know Jenny. I know she has a family. I know her family lives in West St. Paul. She's me. And I think a lot of people were like, nope. Because identifying with someone in your neighborhood who is the same type of person you are, is a parent, is involved in the community, wants West St. Paul to be a great place, you see that and you're like, no, that's me too. And you're fully engaged with it.
I think, the quote about, like, I kept wondering when somebody was going to do something about this, and then I realized that somebody was me. I think there was a big realization of that as we got started too. And I think a lot of the reason that happened, and Jenny always gets mad, but it really was because of Jenny's leadership. And really because Jenny, despite a lot of obstacles put in her way, managed to really hold the reins and really carry out the duties of the office and empower people in the community, despite everything that was going on. So not just because Jenny is a woman, but because Jenny is an exceptional leader. She truly is. And I think that gave us a really good framework to do our work.
Oh, thanks, Dolly, for that. That's great. Building on the discussion of solidarity then, can you speak to the importance of allies on the city council, within the WOW group, within the community generally, and talk a little bit about some of the more helpful ways that people showed support for you?
Well, I can speak to the reason I ever got involved in the first place was an ally who's still on City Council, Dick Vitale, and I spoke about him during my last meeting. He's the one who called me and told me I'd be really good at it, and and I questioned him, and Jenny, you can do this, and every time I questioned it, and he had been on City Council forever. His dad was mayor at one point. He goes way back, right? And so I turned to him a lot with questions, or if I, had concerns about issues, and he always, Jenny, just trust yourself. You always do the right thing. You're right. You're right. You know what? I was wrong. You're right. You're right. I thought about that. You're right. I mean, and I wouldn't have done this in the first place. I never would have run for mayor, and I never would have had the courage to say what I did without somebody like him there. I mean, so the importance of allies, certainly. I know I've mentioned John a couple times, but he really was a sounding board for me for, I don't know if it was all 6 years, but after a couple of years, certainly, getting to know him and really, like we talked about, and it's not just stuff that happens at the table, it's all the stuff that happens before and after and during, and somebody that helped me manage that. And during that May 14th meeting, and I have to look at John Zandler here too. He was the first mayor I served under when I was on City Council, and was a remarkable leader too, and gave me the room to have my voice, and saw me when I raised my hand to speak, and was the first person that ever told me I should run for mayor. I mean, he was. And so all those things, I think, leading again to that May 14th meeting, what you didn't see is that there was a group of dads out in the lobby, not on camera, that were volunteering to watch the kids, so that their wives, their sisters, their mothers, so that the women could come up and speak and have their moment and share their truth. And that, again, that couldn't have happened without our allies. So, yeah, critical.
They also walked us to our cars.
Yep.
When we started having a lot of issues with vandalism, harassment, intimidation behaviors, they were driving past our homes for us. We had, actually a friend of mine who we are on completely opposite ends of the spectrum politically, but he is a police officer, and I was asking him his opinion about some of the things that were playing out, and he was still an ally to me, and kind of gave me like, here's what you need to know about law enforcement, So I think there were a lot of little things along the way, and a lot of them were sort of unseen, which was really beautiful because it really gave women that wanted to speak their moment. And so, they were making sure we all got in our cars after meetings, following us home, driving past, just looking out for us mostly. But the dance thing, that was really awesome. So that, because city council meetings are kind of right at little kid bedtime. So.
And it was also in the venue of social media, right? That there were men out there who had at least my back every time. And although that shouldn't be, you live and die by social media by any means, but that certainly, at least during those years, had a big impact on what happened in the community, in real life, right? And all those conversations that happened on social media were really important. And that the truth was shared even when maybe I wasn't believed. I'd have somebody else, a male ally, jumping in and saying, oh, no, believe me, this happens, and here's something else. And so that really validated our stories, and really helped build this larger movement for sure.
I think if anything, that's just grown too with more allies, even like for me personally through campaigning. And Elisa Ingsarin is on city council now, and she was campaigning against me in the primary. But as soon as that primary was over, Elisa was like, can I please have a sign? It wasn't like, oh, screw you, Barry. It was very supportive. And I think it's easy, based on what you were saying, for women to be like, nope, I'm voting for the other guy. And so just small things like that, too, that you see, that we want our kids to see, too, is important. And, we still have allies now. Social media, people like to talk about people on city council on social media without using their names, which is my favorite. And you can.
And we have a very active neighborhood group on Facebook. We should just say that.
Yeah.
It's extremely active.
Hey, West St. Paul neighbors.
Yeah.
And you can see these allies coming to your defense, and just without social media, it would almost probably be like they were beating them with a baseball bat. But it's more civil discourse on Facebook than it would be in person. But they're still there. They're still here to help. They still want us to help them with these things that they want done on council. And there's just a lot of more trust that's built within the community too. I've met more people in the last 9 months than I had in the prior 3 years of living here. Part of that was knocking on doors, but part of it is too just talking to someone in Target, because it's, I don't know. I mean, we talked about this. It feels like there's a lot more community-driven support right now. It's the Wendy show. I was stuck in my driveway yesterday morning, and I was like, "Can someone please come push me out?" And so someone did, but then 4 or 5 other people offered. The mayor of South St. Paul offered, which is thanks. But that's just, I don't know. I just feel like there's more community driven focus and more people just helping each other right now than there was before.
Yes.
I don't know.
I mean, we talk about, like, in political science and sociology, but like the bowling alone and all that stuff, right?
Social capital.
Some of my liberal arts degree coming in handy now. I think there was a lot of that because Wendy and I were essentially neighbors. Wendy lived like 5 houses away from me, and she borrowed a ladder from us once, and we waved a few times. And then when this happened, it was a nice night. I was like, "Come over, let's all have a couple beers in the backyard, whatever." And I mean, instantly, there was like 4 of us that were suddenly like, we've lived here, well, in the case of like Callie, John's wife, and we've lived in West St. Paul our whole lives, essentially, and Wendy had not, but even so, we were like, oh my gosh, suddenly we have like 5 new people, 5 new neighbors we can borrow a cup of sugar from when we didn't have that before. And that's a very addictive feeling, and something that we really do forget about with like the automation of everything and online everything, is that face-to-face communication is still above everything, the most important thing. And I want to say one other thing about solidarity, because there was something that happened that I thought, and I hope this won't put anybody on the spot, but I thought was one of the biggest shows of solidarity when you brought up Lisa after the primary, and then Wendy won the primary, and Lisa is a very accomplished home cook, and she was making Jamaican beef patties. And she was like putting pictures on Facebook, whatever, and we were all like, that looks so good, whatever. Okay, so again, like that internet connection is like cool, but anybody can sort of be behind that. But when I really was like, this group really has something special, was when Lisa delivered the Jamaican beef patties to Wendy's house, still
in a bag with a drink.
Oh, I mean, it was definitely a time awesome. Where there were, she could have been like, bye, and instead she extended that, and I really thought the world of Lisa when she did that, and I really thought that really spoke to the strength of our group when that happened, that, we were here for a larger purpose, and of course we want all of us to win, and then she was appointed. So when that all happened too, like when more people win, right? And so that's what happened in that case, which was a really wonderful outcome.
And I think you asked about allies, right? That was the initial question, was about allies and solidarity, and I think I'd be remiss, and I'm sure everybody up here would, if I didn't say that there is no way, I talked about Dick Vitale, and he's like family, but also my family, right? And there is no way that this happens without that support for any of us doing any of this, right? And so not only my kids and my brothers and sisters and my mom and my dad and for sure my husband. I mean, it takes a pretty strong partner to say, when all of this is happening for years and years and years, and when I'm saying, don't do anything, don't go punch him in the face, please don't do that, please just let me handle it, I got it, it'll be okay. And I'm coming home in tears, and he can do that and hold it together. I mean, that's pretty remarkable. And again, this part about civility, it's pretty tough to hold that together in some of those moments, for sure. So I'm sure I could speak for all of us on that.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, that was one thing that you and John had both said when I was interested in running, like, make sure your wife is supportive. So we went home and we talked about it, and, she's like, yep, game on. And maybe we'll get to this later, but then things started happening, like, I don't know, vandalism to our personal property and that sort of thing, and she wasn't super into it. But it's a huge time commitment, not only when you're gone and, your spouse is trying to put your kids to bed, but when you're talking about it and you're thinking about it, and it's not just 2 hours a week at the meetings. Yes. And that support, and it's not possible without that support. So yeah, absolutely agree.
Well, let's jump to that question then, which is how do you engage in civil discourse with people that you disagree with against a backdrop of tires being punctured by screws, right? And having to check your car and make sure that before you put your children in the back seat, you're not going to blow out a tire. Like, how can you just speak a little bit about the challenge of that?
See a lot of, when I'm at the table, right, with them, just trying to, remember the bigger picture. So how do you manage that? I think you just have to remember that there's important work to be done, right? And that's the goal. And do to me what you may, I'm not going to stop working for that change, right? Because it's important, like we said, there's the national level, state level, but you're talking about my family, right? And this is affecting my family and my friends and my neighbors. And this is important. So, you know what, I can take a deep breath, and I can know all this stuff that's happening and what's going to happen after I say this. But it's got to be said. Right? Somebody's got to say it. And I don't know. A lot of deep breaths, I think, is what you do.
Primal screaming.
And having that support, right? That you can go back to. And my husband, and to John, and to my family, and scream, and say, but no, don't tell anybody, okay? Just let me talk about it for a second. Right. I don't know, and keep it civil, because you know that that's the only way that things are going to change.
I think for me, there were definitely some points where I was ready to throw down. Yes, there was a lot of deep breathing. I have a thing on my phone, like an animation that I can watch, like literally lowers your blood pressure, breathing with it. So there was some of that. But like we were civil, but we were not subtle. And I feel like, I guess sometimes when I hear civil, I think like, oh, we were really nice and diplomatic about that. And I think there were plenty of moments that I definitely stepped outside of my. Somebody said to me, oh, like, I used to know her in school. She used to be so nice. and I just kept thinking about, after the 2016 election, I really struggled to explain that to my 6-year-old daughter, and still continue to struggle explaining that to her. But it was really interesting when I started being gone 3 nights a week because I was at planning meetings for WOW or admin meetings for WOW or going to city council meetings or what have you. One night I came home and I actually never asked my husband like what he told my kids why I was gone so much. I just kind of kept saying like, oh, mom has meetings, they're boring, And I came home and she said, well, I heard you're gonna kick a bunch of people out of office. And I was just like, oh. And it really actually it really cemented for me the purpose, because if we don't do it now, when she gets to be a voter, what's it going to be like? And so for me, it actually propelled me forward instead of hiding, because I just thought, well, if it's not me, then it will be her. And I hope that when she gets to be my age, that this is not still the thing, because we put up with some screws in our tires and we put up with some people acting like babies and that sort of thing. So,
I think it kind of gets to your point too about like, some of it is just, it's born of necessity, because yes, I could get out there and I could have been talking about this for a number of years in bits and pieces. And I did sometimes, and I shared some things. But you know that you're not going to be believed anyway, right? And that even if you are believed, it won't be that big of a deal, right? It's not that big. So you just get to a point where you just say, okay, you swallow it for now, but keep going forward, because eventually it's got to catch up, right? Eventually it's got to catch up to them, and eventually it's got to catch up on moving forward. So I think that there's some of it that you kind of have to do, that you have to sit in those situations, because what else are you going to do? You're going to run away? And then what are we left with? We're left with people that don't reflect our community, right? And we're going backwards.
And that's the goal of these things, to intimidate us and watch us slink back in our corner. And I just think everyone involved was just in the mind frame of absolutely not. Do whatever you want to some degree. I shouldn't challenge those people right now. No. And we will not stop. And that was important, I think, not only for them to realize that, but also for other people to see this happening to us, but then also seeing like, yep, it's terrible and it sucks. And we're just going to keep moving forward because we have to. I mean, we have to. Or, to Katie's point, who next?
Yeah. Well, and we could keep doing that because, again, the remarkable solidarity that we were feeling that was happening not only within the WOW group, which I'm sort of here to represent tonight, but also, the larger community, the ripple effect that was starting to happen in the larger community. And so when we started getting flat tires, we had an awesome ally at Zach's Auto in West St. Paul. You ever need something, go to Zach's Auto. And he offered up his garage space. He fixed our tires for free. Then Wendy and friends organized a tire changing clinic, because if we were going to have flat tires, then at least we'd know how to change them if we had, like some of us tried not to learn for many years. And so, we were able to kind of keep the lemons into lemonade thing, by just saying, okay, well, you're going to do that, then we're going to do this.
Yeah. And by actually saying, Wendy, I know in one of the city council meetings, actually saying, like, we're not going to stop, right? We're not going to be intimidated. And, I know Mayor Halverson, you said something pretty similar, like, believe me when I say this is happening, and we will keep talking about this. And so just the power of the words continually repeated probably makes a difference too. I love the tire changing clinic. Did that happen once or twice?
Twice in the same day. And then the mechanic that kind of led it, her name is Sam Wicks. She's a mechanic for Metro Transit. She partnered with Zach's to do another one after that, which was awesome. Yeah. So awesome.
Yeah. I'm sorry it had to happen, but it's a great
idea.
It was pretty awesome.
Yeah. Okay, so I have to ask, because again, I teach women in politics. What advice would you give someone who, or perhaps let's just cut to the chase. What advice would you give a woman who wants to be the mayor of her city, or run for city council, or start a social movement?
Do it. Just get out there and do it. And I'll go back to when I got that phone call from Dick Vitale. I was a mom with 3 kids in the backyard, and my youngest was still little enough to be on my hip. And I had never been to a meeting. I didn't know who was on the city council. I had no idea. I didn't know exactly what they did. Did they get paid? I don't know. I mean, I really had no idea. And I had a couple days to decide if I wanted to run or not. And I don't know, I guess. And so I did it. And I literally put my kids in a wagon, in a radio flyer wagon, and we printed out flyers on my printer at home and cut them up, and it knocked on people's doors. I didn't know what I was doing, but I just spoke about, I had lived there all my life. So I had the background, I guess, in that. But I just knocked on people's doors and told them what I wanted and what I thought needed to change. And it was pretty successful. The first time around went pretty well. But just get out. If you really want it and you can see the change that you want, just get out there and do it. There are no qualifications. There are no boxes to check. Just go put in your filing fee and your application and go for it.
yeah, I mean, do it would be my advice. A year and a half ago, it was not on my bucket list to be on city council in West St. Paul. But I did it, and I'm so glad that I did. It's an amazing experience, and you can do it. I mean, I lived there for 3 years, and I didn't know a ton of people, but when you have a story of why you want to run and you can talk to people about something important in their community, they're going to get on board with you. And it's exciting to see that, exciting to see engagement when you knock on a stranger's door, or maybe they've heard about you from their neighbor and they're so excited you're there. And it's a great opportunity. And even if you're not sure about it, talk to people that have done it. I mean, it's really hard. I'm not going to lie. It's really hard to do, but the end result is absolutely worth it. And, you know, when talking to Jenny and John, it was like, if I don't win, I will at least be proud that I tried and that I showed people that if you believe in something, it's cool to fight for it. And it's worth it. I mean, it's like $20 to file in West St. Paul. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely worth doing it.
I would say also, yes, you just have to jump in. There is no handbook. I thought about writing one. But not because I am some great pool of knowledge, but rather because you just need somewhere to start, and you need some people that believe in it, and that are willing to put the work in with you. And I think that, again, was another reason why we were able to be successful, is that we started out with a kind of a core group of women, and they were ready to go. Whatever the task was, okay, I'll do that. Okay, I can take that one. Okay, I'll do this. And we all made a lot of sacrifices of our time, time away from our families. You know, it was worthwhile and purposeful, maybe one of the most purposeful things I have done in my life. But you have to be prepared to do the work. I think that's like the biggest thing, is that it can't be something that you're like, I'll deal with that tomorrow. It's like, no, tonight we're gonna sit down, we're gonna hammer out a mission statement, we're gonna have, you know, everybody sign off on that. We've gotta have plans for this, who's gonna be doing some door knocking, who's, you know, coming to city council next week. We had people who kind of like project managed a lot of things. And so I would say absolutely do it. Find your people that want to do it with you. The people who want to do it with you might really surprise you. They might be people that you wouldn't necessarily have come together socially for any reason. But some of these people have ended up being some of my closest friends. And make sure you're using everybody's talents. I think that's the other thing, is like, again, you're doing something in service of something. It's not for you. And so keeping your eye on the goal and making sure that everything you're doing is in service of that goal. Those are the types of things that will kind of keep that movement rolling, because everybody will feel like they have some buy-in, you know? And we had this group of, especially in the admins, this really interesting mix of backgrounds. We had 2 librarians, so they were awesome at keeping us organized. And Wendy's in HR, and I'm a journalist. And so, you know, we had all these different kind of departments that we would think about things from all of those angles. Like, okay, so you're gonna organize everybody to get to the city council meeting. That person's making sure we have enough chairs because it's gonna be standing room only. That person's calling all the media people to show up so we get something on the news that night. That person, you know, and again, it's just doing the work, it's making the phone calls, and then I think you have to be unafraid, because you're gonna make mistakes. You're probably gonna hurt somebody's feelings. And in our case, we had a very compressed amount of time in which we could do something. So when we look back at sort of our first year of WOW, there were a lot of things that we missed purely from a time perspective. We just couldn't, there weren't enough of us to do. But the awesome thing is that now that we've kind of turned the tide a little bit, now we can focus on some more of those things and say, okay, yes, we want more diversity in our group. We want, you know, we want to do more educational stuff so that people understand how the city works, so that when they show up to city council meetings, it doesn't feel like Greek. And so all of those things, now we can start to work on those. And I think that's also very exciting for a lot of our members who are not so much interested in like the dramatics of the election and allegations, you know.
I might say though, I think that even if you don't think that you have people, you know, because when I ran for city council, I felt very alone, other than my family. I I mean, I knew people because I'd lived there all my life, but I was just kind of doing it on my own. And I wrote my own stuff, and I wrote my own site, and I wrote my own, and did all of it myself with the help of my kids and my husband, right? But then after I did that, and after I got into office the first time, then I started to see my people, right? Then they started coming out and felt like, oh my gosh, did you see what you hear? Did you hear what she said about the park? Did you hear what she said about the path? Did you, and I never knew that those people were there, but I was just there, just saying all this stuff, right, about my experiences in the world. And so even if you don't feel like you have a big network, but you can feel that you have a message, just do it. Just do it.
Yep. And Katie was right. You don't know who your allies are going to be. And, I can look out in this audience, and I didn't know any of these people until, I ran for office. And, at that meeting when I said, hey, I'm gonna run for city council, I rewatched it like a month later. And, like everyone's clapping. I wish Edie was in here. I looked over and I saw Edie clapping, and I was like, this is why I'm doing this. And just messages afterwards, and it was like, yeah, these are my people now. And they weren't people that I asked beforehand to say, if I run for city council, will you vote for me? And like even, I don't know, I don't go on and on about it, but they're like people that would go door knocking for me like at night. Like Kevin's right here, and his son Milo, I wish Milo was here. Milo would play Pokemon, and Kevin would knock on doors, and he would come over and get another list. And there were so many people like that. I'm sure my neighbor was wondering why all these strange men were coming to my door. But they were male allies that were on board with this story and this change that we needed to make. And I didn't know they were my allies before. And so you never know, and it's worth finding out.
It's kind of mind-blowing when I look back at the old tapes of those first couple of meetings, because we didn't even know all of each other's names at those meetings when we got up and spoke necessarily. We weren't really on a first name basis with people. And so to look back at that now, which really was not that long ago, and be like, wow, yeah, we've spent hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours together now, getting to know each other as human beings besides activists or running for office. But it's a very cool feeling.
Okay, well, I've got one last question, and then I want to make sure we have a few minutes for any audience questions that we might have time for. So my last question for you all is, it has to do with the concept of symbolic representation that we talk about in women in politics and political science generally, which is the idea that people from politically underrepresented groups, in this case we'll just go with women, get something tangible and important from seeing someone like them in office, as we've already discussed here. That they see the representative as standing for them in office. And so we're really talking about sort of a role model effect, which again, you all have brought up a number of times tonight. But I'm just wondering if you can think a little bit about the impact that you hope this movement that you've all been a part of together will have on citizens, all kinds of citizens in your community. Not just people who've been following this story closely, and not just people who have been your allies or part of WOW or supported anybody's run for office, but everyone in West St. Paul, and really everyone who's followed this story outside of West St. Paul. I don't live in West St. Paul. I really wish to gosh I did. I would be.
Because we're awesome.
Yes, seriously. So there's an effect really on those of us in one more suburb out of West St. Paul, that those of us who've been following the story, we're still paying attention and we're still, sort of rooting for you. And so I'm just wondering what kind of impact do you hope you have, sort of longer term, by going through all of this, which has not been an easy road. It's been great, obviously, but you've had some challenges.
I think one thing that I think of all the time when people ask about this is my youngest daughter. At one time when I was on city council, and we were at the West St. Paul Ice Arena, as we often are. And we were in the parking lot, and we were walking out to the car, and we saw a woman who used to be the mayor of Mendota Heights, Sandra Krebsbach. And she was mayor at the time. And I also knew her because I knew her daughter when we were in high school together, right? And so I had sleepovers at her house, and she remembered me and saw me in the parking lot and said hi. my daughter Hazel said, "Oh, who's that?" I said, "Oh, it's somebody's mom that a friend of mine, and she's also the mayor of Mendota Heights." And she looked at me and she said, "Girls can be mayors too?" I mean, literally, that's what she said. I said, "Yeah, of course they can." But then I thought about it, and she had never really seen that in her own community, and oh my God, well, I hope that that's certainly something that we change, But I think also on a larger scale, we talk about representation matters and the reasons, and one of them is that I hope that it instills more trust in at least our local government at this level, right? Because when people see somebody that looks like them and that lives like them, maybe their housing situation is different, their modes of transportation are different, they look different, their income levels are different, their professions are different, then they feel, and that's why I said if you have a message, just get out there, because people will come to you. Then they feel comfortable sharing with you. We have issues with police and with all different levels in all of our communities. And I think that if we can get people who represent our communities in elected positions, then our underrepresented communities have that voice, and we can start to work towards solving those problems. Because like I said, even the people with the best of intentions who are in overrepresented communities just they can't even identify the issue. They can't identify the need, much less work towards solving it, right? So I sure hope that that's something that we can do, at least on a small level.
I think our local cable channel just did a 7-minute clip on Lisa and I being the first time West St. Paul's had 2 women on West St. Paul, or 2 women on the city council. I don't want to have those anymore. I don't want to be like, oh, this is the first time this, is the first time that. I mean, it's cool to have that title, but let's just, when there will be 6 and a mayor, that'll be enough, and
That's right.
And I don't know, I hope people see that. I hope people say, I don't have to live in this town my whole life to run for city council. I don't have to be retired or a business owner or, live in a huge house. I want people to see that, it's hard. You can be a parent and you can still do this. You can have little kids and you can do this. Because that's what our town is made up of. It's not made up of what our council's been in the past. And so when you see someone you relate to representing you, you feel heard. You feel a little heard. You feel like your voice matters, and I think that's what's important.
I'm in the midst of reading Michelle Obama's book, so I have a lot of her quotes kind of floating around in my mind, but she recently, probably in the last 6 months, was quoted as saying, I've seen the people that sit around those tables, okay, and they're not that smart. What I think I take from that, and what I want other people to take from that, is not so much denigrating other people, but sometimes, but that you don't have to have a set of prescribed qualifications to make a difference in your community. You don't have to have a journalism and political science degree to call the media and say, hey, did you know this is going on? You don't have to, you can just go do it. You can. And I think that's the biggest thing is that empowerment. Because once you get rolling and once those people start coming to you because of your message and you get a little taste of success, always helps, then you want to keep doing it. But the most important part is to actually go do that. And I just want people to know that, like, there was nothing in our group of women. They're all fabulous and wonderful and amazing and smart and funny. And maybe that's the most important thing, is a really good sense of humor. But there was nothing in that group of women that was like, well, obviously, because they were all educated at Yale, and you know what I mean? It was like, no, we were just devoted, and we were willing to share the work. And that's what I really think people need to know.
Well, I hope, and I won't keep talking, but I hope that we are able to be kind of a case study, right, that's carried forward on this solidarity piece that we talked about that none of us can quite put our finger on. But I will never forget that night when I had my first raw rough draft, and it was me and my husband and John and Callie, and I read it, and crying here and there over it, and Callie came over, jumped on the couch right next to me, and she grabbed my hand, and she's, Jenny, we believe you, we are with you. And I have never felt that kind of support from a woman that, I didn't really know Callie that well. I knew John better than I knew Callie at the time. But I believed her. I said, oh my God, this is really happening. And I hope that every woman out there can feel that at least at some point in their lives, because it's really remarkable.
Yeah. And in order for people to feel that, they have to be willing to say it out loud, like you did, right? I mean, that's the really important part of the story that I think is a really important part of that solidarity piece too. I mean, from an outside perspective, it sure seems important, and these two seem to think so too. But I think that, I think we put our finger on some of it at least. The sharing of the words is really important too. So, whew. Do we have questions? Oh, Deborah, I think has a question. I think we have people with microphones ready to spring into action. Okay, yeah. Deborah's in communication and journalism. She's got this covered. Yes.
Wonderful world of West St. Paul. I'm throughout all of this, I have this burning question. Did these people who didn't want you at the table, these people who, I don't know, didn't sleep at night thinking up ways to harass you, and worse yet, the death threats, the social media trolling that you and other women who put themselves out there face, whether you're journalists or athletes or politicians, it's horrible what you go through. Did these people ever show their hand to you? When you were thinking about, how to respond in a civil way, you kind of have to have a sense of where they're coming from. And did you have a sense of, how and why they thought you were disrupting the social order? Were they fearful of you, or what was in your head when you would think about this process and why all of this resistance?
You give the nice
No,
answer.
go ahead.
No, you give the nice answer.
Give the nice one.
No, I think they were afraid, and I knew that they were afraid. I didn't know it at first. When I first was a member of our city council, right, I was the one that was afraid. And every time I spoke, my voice shook. And if you would go back, I don't know if those videos are still out there somewhere, but I mean, you can hear it, my voice quivering, right? But like I was saying before, the more I spoke, the more I heard from other people saying, yeah, you're right. Can you say that again? Can you push for that some more? And then my voice got a little stronger and a little louder, and then the pushback got a little harder and a little stronger and a little more consistent. And so I'm sure it was because they were afraid. They have been in control of local government, and like we said then, a lot of people's lives, to a certain extent locally, for, I don't know, for decades. Yeah. Right? And there's a very small group. When I say they, it's a very small group.
Very.
And they knew, right, that because I didn't get, when I initially ran for city council, I didn't get endorsements from anybody. I didn't seek out the people who people were telling me to ask for their support. I just ran. Because I didn't want to be tied to anybody, and I didn't know enough about it anyways. And so and I'm sure, looking back, I'm sure I was a threat in that way to, oh my God, and more people are coming to say that she's right? Whoa, we can't have that, because what are we going to do? What are we going to do? You guys can go ahead. I'm sure that it was a lot of fear of disrupting that.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't afraid, but the only reason I wasn't afraid was because of Jenny. I mean, otherwise, it would have been terrifying. And it was fear-based. It's still fear-based. You know, they really struggle with, especially me, you know, a queer woman in office that maybe beat some of them in the election. Oops, there go my tires. It's
the red Pontiac vibe.
It's a red Pontiac vibe, which I told some of them in a meeting because...
at least get the right car.
Because get the right car, and I'm not scared of them. I mean, they're children. They're not, but they're acting like children, and that's what kids do. You know, when they don't get their way, they throw a fit. And that's what it feels like. But again, it could be scary, and really the only reason honestly, was because Jenny has been through it, and I don't even know. I mean, why you protect me? I don't know, but like I didn't feel that fear. I felt that drive to be like, nope, you were done. You were completely irrelevant, and now it's time for you to step aside where people that actually care about the community and come forward and represent the community.
I think there were moments where I was a little freaked out. I moved in the process of this whole situation, still within West St. Paul. Amazon delivery guy can't find my house, but they did. Google Maps can't find my house, but they did. So, you know, and it was the first meeting at which we had heard that there may be some flap from the other side, these they people. And, you know, we had someone carry a gun into that meeting and stand in the back of the room wearing a t-shirt that said, "Shh, no one cares." I just think when you talk about social movements, and I know we're here to talk about civil discourse, but no social movement has ever been successful without upsetting a few votes, right? And the closer you get to that, the bigger the scare tactics. And so it's up to you to decide if you're going to stare that down or not. And I don't think that there's a right answer with that. I think sometimes you fold your cards and you try again later. But because we had a really remarkable group of people who said, if they show up and they show up with a gun, we're all still standing up, right? And we agreed. And so I think that was a lot of it. Would I have gotten up by myself or maybe with one other person and done that? If they walked into the room with a gun, I don't know, to be completely honest. The bravery definitely came from, oh, we're really like rattling some cages now, which is like a little bit thrilling, I'm not gonna lie. And then to know that there were all these other people looking out for us and watching out for us made that possible for us to do that and to support each other through that. And then once we did, I mean, it was like dance party in the parking lot, for real.
I have a comment and then sort of a question. My comment is back to what you talked about, the solidarity and what was the catalyst. And I live in West St. Paul, and I would say a catalyst was that the target, the way the initial kind of attack happened toward Mayor Halverson and Samantha Green was so gender-based. It was a gender-based attack to leave sanitary napkins and tissues. It was an insult to our gender. And so I think that really rallied a kind of a gendered response. For me, it did anyway. And then sort of building on what you said, I mean, I know there's a lot of spirit of success here that's really a lot to celebrate, but I also feel really disappointed in structures, formal structures, because the kinds of claims that came out in the 20-some testimonials, and Mayor, your testimonials, there's a corruption, there's criminal activity, and then there was criminal activity afterwards with the vandalism is a nice word, you know, people's property was damaged. So I was disappointed in the formal responses of anything from human resources, these are employees, to ethics commissions, to law enforcement, or investigations into corruption, into criminal activity, and also journalism. I was really disappointed. I saw the little bit of journalism there was. I didn't understand why a newspaper didn't pick it up as an investigative journalism story and follow it. I didn't understand why they didn't do follow-up stories. I even called one reporter after the night of the 20 testimonials or so, and they weren't there, but they were actually watching the video while I was talking to him on the phone. But I said, like, aren't you going to report on this? I mean, isn't this corruption? Isn't this what you're hearing in these stories? So I was disappointed I was really proud of the democracy and the representative government representation holding accountability for elected officials by voting them out. I was really disappointed by all the other formal structures I thought should have kicked in.
You are not alone. There were a lot of disappointments along the way from our perspective there too. There were a lot of failures from the infrastructure that is meant to protect and support the citizens of the city. And if you are not a member of WOW, we'd love to have you. So that's, as a journalist myself, I was feeding people these stories, and I was very surprised at how much work it took to convince people that this was a real story, not just like, oh, there was a little dust up at City Hall in little old West St. Paul. Like, I was like, I am handing you a story. I am handing you the sources. I am handing you the inside info you need to write a story that could win awards. This should have been, to me, was a direct, correlation between the national story, the Me Too movement, and what was happening nationally, and what it was just this microcosm. And I'm like, as a writer, like, I know I'm in this story, but as a writer, if somebody called me with this story, I'd be like, pay dirt, like, let's do it, let's really, And so that was disappointing. We had a victims meeting with police that was incredibly disappointing. Yeah, there was, but that is what happens when people in power are entrenched in power through the entire structure, right? Like, are we going to get into intersectionality here? And so, there are people who exerted influence in a lot of different departments for many, 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 many years who probably have beers in their neighbors' backyards with them, and it's very difficult to reach those people, which is why you need representative government at all levels in your city, and you need people who are working for your city, who are truly working for your city and not for politicians in the city. And those are things that we will be working on in 2019, so join us.
Well, I think what you're saying too is the representative government and the people who are there, and then the people who they are tied to, right? Because, like, I know Katie was able to reach out to a lot of media people, right? But imagine, right, we have all these other people here, there too, who have all these people in positions of power in the media, or in, on the side of the law, or on the side of the this or the that. And so it's important that you have people in power in government, right, who can reach out to their sources, who will take that story, right, who will follow that lead, who will believe that victim. And so that's, I know that the Mendoza Heights police chief had posted something a while ago saying, we believe victims. And I remember reading that, and I was like clapping, right? And I love Kelly anyways, but I remember thinking, oh my gosh, if only the world were more like this, right? And how things would be different. So important for a lot of reasons.
What ward do you live in? Yeah, right. I'm going to skate around this answer quite a bit for various reasons, but rest assured, I know you have 3 people in office that weren't there before that are willing to work very hard to make sure we don't ever run into that again. And, you know, we're all in this room. Because we understand. I get it. I get it. I get not getting a follow-up call from the police department just to say, I'm so sorry, we don't know what's going on. I don't know. All this boils down to like a human factor, and that's just a decent thing to do. Above all, I mean, I think decency is something that should happen, and a callback is a decent thing to do. And so I think there's a lot we can learn as a city, as a governing body, but also as just humans in responding to those sort of things.
We probably have time for like one more question, just so. Oh, great, thank you.
This guy.
Keep it appropriate.
I'll talk loud. During the course of the election, we saw other examples of the blatant sexism and misogyny. One that pops into my head right away is the state representative contest down in Olmsted County, where the male ripped the microphone out of the female's hand. Mm-hmm. I was really hopeful that maybe what was happening in West St. Paul was going to permeate across the board. It didn't, but it still can. And I think, and I'm going to ask you this question, 55 legislators voted against the ERA amendment in Minnesota legislature. How do we take what you made in West St. Paul and make it go statewide?
I would say you start with getting more people in places like West St. Paul, because a lot of your state level people will come from city level, right? Or at least city level people will support the people running for state level. So if you have the right people in place here, you know, it's kind of a feeder system, right? That's one place. I don't know. Wendy, did you have?
Yeah, I mean, we have to share a story. You know, we have to let other cities know, maybe where there aren't women on city council, that, oh, you can get on city council when you're a woman. I think that's important to share that story. We're very fortunate where, you know, our state representative, Mark Hansen, and our Senator Matt Klein would probably rather walk out the door than vote no for something like the ERA. So we're fortunate in that. And it's just sharing the story and talking to others. You know, you don't have to be on city council to talk to others. It's, if your neighbor's voting for someone, you need to do your research on city council candidates. Otherwise, you see a familiar name and you vote for them and you're voting for the wrong person. So it's just educating people, I think, to get to that point too.
I think that's where WOW can really provide at least a case study of how this can work in other places. You know, there are a lot of volunteer organizations that, you know, League of Women Voters comes to mind. They're short on volunteers, man. And so, you know, for example, when we had our candidate forums, Julie Eastman, who's in the auditorium tonight, she organized those because we didn't have, again, so who's going to do that? Well, I guess that's us. And I think that's where, you know, we could be a model. And that's actually something that I sort of hoped would come out of some of the media coverage that we got, was helping that story get to other people who might be interested in doing something like this, but maybe hadn't for one reason or another. And so, yeah, I'm available for hire. So if I could take this off a volunteer basis, you know, if there was some way we could make it an organization that we could power with some money, I think we could do that. I think we could do that. I think we could change that representation. I think we might not always agree with those people who are voting, but I think we could at least get 55 more people that would at least vote for the ERA. I mean, that just is bananas to me. So I sort of feel like, you know, looking at the national scope, and when you look at the world, it feels so overwhelming. Like, I can't fix any of that. It's paralyzing. And so it's just person to person, group to group, event to event, like something like this, reaching out to people and saying you should do this because you can do it too. There was nothing special about us in that regard. And that's how that change happens, but it is so painfully slow. So the more people that jump in, the better. It's 2019. So.
And I think it's also about getting more people from, not just women, but people from underrepresented communities, and underrepresented communities across the board into positions of power.
Yes.
Whether that's elected, whether that's school teachers, whether that's doctors, or whatever it is, that there are people who are talking about these issues, because otherwise, right, you're a retired business owner that's sitting up there, and you're so-and-so, they're not talking about the ERA, because they don't want to. So they're not going to talk about it, so nobody's going to hear about it. I mean, I guarantee there are people in this room who didn't know that, right? It gets to be an untold story, and then it's not important. So then we just continue to not vote for it, and it never happens. We just need to get more people talking about those stories and paying attention, because you're right, when you hear it, what? What? Are you kidding me? You know, so I think just getting more people from underrepresented. Is that you? Jeez.
Cannot take you anywhere.
That's it.
Yes.
Flipping the table.
I just like to add quickly that yes, change happens very slowly, but once in a while there's events that accelerate change, and I think you all are a really excellent example of that. Like once in a while there's sort of bursts forward that that just kind of give us a boost in a certain direction. So thank you all for all of your work.
Well, I wanted to thank you too for hosting us.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I
pleasure.
told you that when I met you very briefly before this, but I'm the oldest of 6 kids, and 4 of us went to St. Thomas, right? My dad works here as an electrician here. One of my sisters and her husband met here and are married in the chapel. We have another one who I'm proud to say graces your Hall of Fame here at St. Thomas. So we are very much invested in the St. Thomas community and very much appreciate it. So thank you.
Well, thank you. It was an absolute pleasure. Thank you all very much.
Thank you to our panelists. When we devised this whole idea of the Solve Initiative, this was exactly what we envisioned, and this being our inaugural event, I just can't think of a better kickoff and foundation for this whole idea. It's often said that heroes are people who see themselves as ordinary people who are able to channel their fear and their anxiety and to find the best within them for the common good. And if that's what heroes are, ladies, you are heroes. So. And a genuine thank you to all of you that are here tonight. So often people end these events by saying a cursory thanks for being here, but you made a conscious choice by being here tonight. Too many people think being political is staying home and watching CNN and screaming at one of the talking heads. Change is difficult because you're fighting a lot of inertia. So it's about steadiness, it's about dedication, it's about on a cold March night battling the rain when it would be easier to stay home. So hats off to each of you for being here tonight, and I hope you are as inspired by these ladies and the change that you can go on in your communities to create as I was. Thank you very much.